Initially appointed in 1880 for a 2-year term before returning in 1884, President Rafael Núñez was known largely for his pragmatism. Though interested in modernization, he also valued order and stability over senseless radical idealism. In a nutshell, Núñez's main initiative was to re-centralize the government and re-establish church presence. By 1886, this vision would culminate in a constitutional rewrite so robust that it would remain in force for almost a century. The reforms were numerous. Regional autonomy was rolled back significantly in favour of a central unitary state, presidents were given the power to appoint and have greater control over regional governors and mayors, and presidential terms were extended from 2 to 6 years. In terms of the church-state relation, the new constitution re-established Catholicism as the official state religion once again. Furthering this positive relationship with the church, Núñez would also offer compensation to churches whose land had previously been confiscated under the aforementioned land auctioning, and even welcomed back the Jesuits to the country. Much to the delight of conservatives, public school curricula would also see itself realigned with traditional church doctrine. Meanwhile, as with previous constitutions, Núñez's rewrite would also give the nation a new name, this time La República de Colombia, or the Republic of Colombia. Ultimately, the reforms of this constitution were highly transformative for the nation, though they were far from the only impactful developments of the decade. The country would also undergo significant economic evolution, including the founding of a national bank in 1880, a surge of land privatization, and an expansion of railroad construction. Easily the largest development, though, was the boom in the nation's coffee economy, which saw roughly tripled exports between 1878 and 1892 due to a rise in international coffee prices. This cemented the Republic of Colombia as a Latin American epicenter for coffee exports, alongside Brazil and Costa Rica. The boom would soon reshape the labour landscape, and the literal landscape, throughout entire regions, particularly the Andean interior. Antioquia and Caldas, for instance, would see a rapid expansion of migrant labour, though sadly, often under harsh conditions and with minimal legal protection. Despite such a sudden economic boom, the country would take a sudden turn, however, when Núñez passed away in 1894. Upon his death, Vice President Miguel Antonio Caro would assume the presidency. Unlike Núñez though, Caro was a staunch conservative and far more of an ideological traditionalist. This, along with his comparative lack of political finesse, would soon become cause for tension among the liberals. Under Caro, their leaders would be pushed out of office, their newspapers censored, and their coffee farm strongholds often excluded from important state investments, causing liberal power to rapidly deteriorate throughout the remainder of the decade. Beyond elite strongholds, meanwhile, liberal-aligned regions in general would often receive little public investment, with Caro instead favouring conservative regions for vital infrastructure projects such as roads and schools. Perhaps one of the most contentious developments, however, was Caro's infamous tax on coffee exports. This was implemented as a direct reaction to the immense economic growth of liberal landowners and their recent push for more control over regional revenue and trade policy. These pushes for reform deeply concerned Caro, who was suspicious that the elites were organising a rebellion under the guise of economic autonomy. Even if this were true though, the coffee tax he'd subsequently imposed would severely weaken the stability of the situation. Beyond infuriating the liberals, the resulting crippled trade would also contribute to a wider economic downturn. In a state of panic, Caro would later ease the coffee tax and, most notably, expand the supply of currency. Though intended to amend the economy, this latter measure would however end up contributing to a huge increase in inflation, dramatically decreasing the value of the peso in exchange markets. To this, wages stagnated and food prices soared. As discord surrounding economic mismanagement grew, urban protests would then erupt in major cities. Rather than enact reforms, however, Caro would turn to damage control. Vocal opposition leaders would be jailed, liberal-aligned newspapers shut down, and emergency powers expanded. Though this crackdown managed to temporarily silence dissent in the capital, its effect elsewhere was a different story. By now, even some conservatives were distancing themselves from Caro, uneasy with his authoritarianism and inability to manage the economy. Despite some common ground between liberal and conservative moderates, however, radical division elsewhere would ultimately prevail. The final straw of this conflict were the results of an 1898 presidential election, which saw a new conservative president, Manuel Antonio Sanclemente, take power. Though Caro was out, many viewed Sanclemente's presidency as a mere continuation of his regime, in large part due to allegations of electoral fraud at Caro's hands. These tensions eventually gave way to a rebellion beginning in 1899 that became known as La Guerra de los Mil Días, or the Thousand Days War. As the name suggests, it lasted 1,000 days and saw between an estimated 100,000 and 120,000 people die from either violence or disease, making it one of the most brutal conflicts in Colombia's history. The war saw liberals engage in guerrilla warfare, while conservatives formed paramilitary groups in retaliation, killing mercilessly without fair trial. Much of this turmoil took place in regional villages, where both guerrilla and paramilitary groups demanded allegiance from villagers and killed those who were suspected of opposing. For their own safety, many villagers would also be forced to conscript into these armies. Beyond this, the conflict would also lead to mass displacements across the country, with many being forced to evacuate to escape the danger. As entire towns were burned, crops and vital infrastructure destroyed, and civilian homes looted for supplies, the influx of displaced people moving into the comparatively safer cities would soon swell beyond capacity. This population boom would severely strain vital state services such as sanitation, water supply, and housing, which, along with a widespread famine caused by destroyed food crops, would soon give way to disease. Bogotá, for instance, would see infant mortality reach as high as 25% and life expectancy drop as low as 30 and under. Eventually, by October 1902, the war would come to an end, with the better supplied conservatives emerging victorious in battle over the now materially exhausted liberals. To this, a ceasefire treaty known as the Treaty of Neerlandia would be signed before a definitive final surrender treaty known as the Treaty of Wisconsin was ratified on conservative terms the following month. Although the treaty guaranteed amnesty for rebel combatants, affected families would be left with no compensation. The treaty also offered little in the way of underlying structural reform. The root causes of the war, such as partisan exclusion, centralised power, and land inequality, would remain unresolved.